Hi everyone, it's Ellen again. I've got a project here which is all about choosing the highlights of your week, which means you've got a bit of free reign here. The idea is that you choose your favourite part of the week, favourite thing you do. So it could be just a little still life of you having a cuppa like I've got here. I managed to get out into the garden and have a hot drink and read a book for a little while, so I did a little still life while I was outside. It could be while you're doing something with somebody, or anything you like really, so it gives you a bit of freedom as to what you want to do. This is a watercolour project this time, and it's a reason really to practice your sketching, where you see something, or maybe take a snap of something and then really sketch it down quickly with your pencils, and then paint with the watercolours on top. So the finish doesn't have to be amazing or anything like that. It's more about observation, and it's about mixing your colours and getting the colours as accurate as you can. Okay, so this is my picture so far. I've done a few areas which has been the first layer of paint. I've done them already because they're wet on wet and you have to let them dry and then paint on top of them. So that's why I've done those very quickly. This background here is a glass table, which I'm starting to regret as there's quite a lot to draw and understand in the pattern. So with wet on wet, for anyone who doesn't remember, if you take an area that you want to create quite a loose and blended colour in your picture, you put water down on your piece of paper first, and then you take pre-mixed colours and then you drop them in to your area of water and they blend in together. You don't have a huge amount of control with something like that. What the tip is that the paint will go where the water goes. So if you're doing an edge like something like this, I've only brought the water up into the edge of the cup here, and the paint goes as far as the water and then it stops. So that's where you get your control from. As you can see, the two greens have blended quite a lot in there. So again, it's something you don't want to be too precise about. It's quite loose really. And then where I did the rim here, this was wet paint on dry paper. So for instance, if you want to put a colour straight onto the dry paper, you have control where it goes. It doesn't go anywhere else, and that's how I created that sort of circle with the red, keeping an eye on the edges all the way around. The important thing to remember with watercolour is that if you have two areas of paint that are next to each other and they are wet, they will bleed. Okay, so you see the green starts to go into the red, so it's quite important that when you do your picture, sorry, my thing's gone off, there we go, when you do your picture, that you do one area, let it dry, or move on to another piece of the picture. So for instance, I could paint this ring and then I could go over here because I've got this gap in between. But if you want to do a colour that's next to each other, so for instance, I've done this first layer of yellow ochre for the hot chocolate in the cup. If you have that next to the red, that will bleed into it. So you must let the red dry first and then put the yellow ochre in afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to put some depth and some detail into the tabletop and into the book cover. So these kind of areas here and here, I'm going to stand up for this. Sometimes you get looser, more flowing marks when you stand up, and hopefully get a more successful picture as a result. Okay, so in my palettes, I've got the same palette as I had before. I've got lemon yellow, cadmium red, crimson. This is cerulean. This is primary blue, which I don't normally have. It's the nearest I have to ultramarine. If I want to make it slightly more purple, I would put my a tiny bit of crimson into my primary blue and make it more purpley like ultramarine. this is leaf green, this is sap green, which again, not my favourite version of green. I'd rather have phthalo green. I've put a little bit of the primary blue next to it so I can make it more blue if I want it. And I've got a little bit of yellow ochre, again not my favourite colour, but I thought that would be a good base colour for the hot chocolate in the cup. Okay, so I'm going to make another green to go over my first layer of my table. So I'm going to take a little bit of my sap green, a tiny bit of my primary blue, because we wanted a nice bluey green, a bottle green, and that bottle green will get knocked back with a tiny bit of crimson in there. Now, watercolour painting is all about layers, so I've done one uniform layer in this darker green, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave areas that I want to keep pale. So I'm just making my green areas that bit darker, so I'm just dropping them in. This is dry now, and I'm going to sort of blend it into my tabletop like this. And some paler green sort of fronds on the leaf, so I'm painting them. I'm sort of painting around them, if you like. Now if you go over the edge a little bit like that, that's okay, because you can make your brush thirsty and you can do a little bit of a scrub and pick it up. I'm taking this darker green, again I'm painting light to dark. Done my light colours first and dropping my dark colours in on top. I'm going to outline that leaf a little bit. Not doing very well at keeping in the edges. Never mind. I've got this nice strong contrast. I think that's a highlight. I think that's some sun bouncing on a paler bit of the table. I'm not entirely sure what that is. Sometimes it helps to understand what these things are. I did have to go back and I did have to put a little bit of extra clarity in my table, because I ended up painting what I didn't know. I didn't know what I was painting, and that's not a good thing really. So you see, putting a darker tone on top, it kind of adds a little bit of definition, a little bit of clarity in the pattern. A little bit of contrast. Oh dear. Lots of picking up to do. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of contrast underneath the cup here. It's really quite dark under here. I'm using really light pressure to go around the cup. So just building up the layers, getting getting that contrast in. Like so, and soften the edge of that. Okay, I'm going to let those areas of green dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on this side. I'm going to make some more green, so a little bit more dark green. A bit more of the primary blue. A bit of crimson. Some water. There we go. Okay, so I'm looking at the book now. I've dropped some lime green in here, and I'm going to be looking at where the face is. So I want that good contrast between the face and the greenery behind. So what I'm doing is I'm using the tip of the brush to go around the outside like this, and I'm going to be really quick, because what I don't want is, I don't want a harsh edge on the edge of this green here. I want to soften it. So I'm going to get some water in there to soften it down. Now I'm starting to get into ferns and things like that, and I want to leave some parts lighter. I want to reveal some of the paler green underneath. So I've got the tops of the ferns. I've got this top part of the fern here. I'm going to make an edge there. This is going to be dark. And then I leave what's underneath to keep it pale. So this is an edge of a fern here. Shadows coming across like this. Again, I can paint the fronds in if I want. Actually, they're more vertical, aren't they? So I can just flick them up like that. I can take the green here. I've got another palm tree. I think it's a palm tree. I'm going to flick it like that. And then this is a crisp edge of green here. So I've got the contrast for the palm leaf underneath. That's dark. Just verbalising what's going through my mind, trying to understand what's going on. There's some red flowers down here, so I want to keep those clean, because we know red and green are opposite colours, complementary colours, and if we lay red on top of green, it's going to go brown, and we don't want that. We want nice bright flowers. So I'm leaving the white areas for the flowers, and then I'm going to flick the moving paint up here for the ferns like that, and then bring more green down. Oops, a blob there. Get rid of that. And there's more red as we come down, so I'm leaving more white like that. Okay, so now I'm going to leave the face, because that's still wet and I don't want any flesh colours and any greens to blend in together, so I'm going to leave that side. So now we'll go back onto the cup and the hot chocolate inside. So to make a brown, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take cadmium red, I'm going to take some lemon yellow and make an orange. And then I'm going to add a little bit of cerulean, paler blue, being very bad and not washing my brushes in between. Mustn't do that really. A little bit more red. This is actually the same way of making a flesh colour. If you want to make it darker, you add more blue into it. So really you start off with a peach, which is like a pale orange, and then you add blue, add blue, add blue until you get a brown. Okay, so that's quite a nice rich brown. Water it down a little bit. Don't want to go too heavy too quickly. Okay, so I'm going to start putting some darker tones into my cup where the hot chocolate is. So you can see already straight away there's another tone coming out there. To make this darker, what you do is you either leave it, let it dry, and then you can put a second of the same layer on top, which makes the colour more intense, or you can mix a grey and then lay your grey on top of the brown. Grey's really nice actually because it's a way of creating a shadow on top of any colour. So you can have a red under there, a yellow, a green, whatever you like, and you just want a shadow and just lay that grey on top, and then the colour still comes through. Just adding my darker tone into this part of the hot chocolate. And again, I can drop more down somewhere where I want a shadow, or I can water it down or spread it thin, whichever you want to do. But what I'm doing is I'm painting it quickly, so everything is wet all at the same time and you don't get any hard edges within your shape. You don't want lines particularly. Like that. Okay, so you may see in my drawing and in the photograph there are some bubbles on top, and those can be darker. I think I'm going to make them darker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that to dry, and then I would drop any darker dots onto the hot chocolate afterwards. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, let it all dry, and I shall speak to you soon.